Welcome in to One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. I'm your host, John Barry, and in today's episode, we're going to be previewing and predicting a great week 3 of college football and giving you my official top 25 after week 2. Let's get into it. If you guys are enjoying the college football content on the channel, do me a favor and subscribe. We really want to grow this platform, but I need your guys' help and support to do it. With that being said, let's talk some predictions. It's been a little bit of a shaky start this season. We're 9-6, had a 6-3 week 1, but a rough 3-3 week 2. We need to bounce back, and I think we have the chance to do it with this great slate of games. I mean, what more could you ask for? We have huge, marquee brands: Notre Dame, A&M, Georgia, Tennessee, and then we get the South Florida trying to pull another upset. Can Florida pick themselves back up? And then the two under the radar games of the week, I think, are Clemson, Georgia Tech, and Vandy, South Carolina. There's not much more you can ask for in a week of college football. I'm super excited. Let's start predicting. All right, the first game we're going to predict is Clemson at Georgia Tech in the 9 a.m. or noon window, depending on where you are at. And the biggest question I have for this game is, who is Clemson? Because coming into the year, we thought, or at least I did, ACC favorite, potential national title contender. Cade Klubnik, Heisman contender, great wide receivers, potential top 10 picks on the D-line in Parker and Woods. What's not to like? Tom Allen comes in at DC. Clemson should be great. And then the season started, and the offense was terrible against LSU, and Antonio Williams was hurt. And then you come out and you're down 16-0 against Troy in week 2, and you look nothing like a team that can compete in really any real way. But I think back to a team like Oregon, who last year you beat Idaho 24-14 in week 1 and escaped Boise in week 2 with a game-winning field goal. But then the rest of the way, and there were a lot of questions at this point, but the rest of the way, you were the best team in college football for the regular season, beating Ohio State, winning the Big Ten championship, and securing the number 1 overall seed in the playoff. So just because it hasn't clicked for weeks 1 and 2 doesn't mean it won't click. Clemson certainly has the talent that if it does, they could still be a force to be reckoned with in college football. Next big thing, Haynes King and Antonio Williams' health. I don't think Georgia Tech can win this game without Haynes King. Aaron Philo played well against Gardner-Webb, but it's Gardner-Webb, and Philo just doesn't provide the same type of threat Haynes King does on the ground, which opens up so much for this Georgia Tech offense. And then Antonio Williams, Clemson, with their lack of a run game, kind of the opposite of Georgia Tech, has put a lot on Klubnik and these receivers. And Wesco's great and Moore's great, but Antonio Williams is the best one, and him being there makes them that more dangerous offensively. For purposes of this prediction, Haynes King has been practicing. I'm going to assume he's good to go. Antonio Williams, day-to-day, I'm going to assume he tries to give it a go, but maybe isn't 100%. And then finally, Brent Kiever's ranked opponents. He's 5-0. Every time he's gotten this chance, he's got it done. Do I think that ends this weekend? No, I don't. I think Georgia Tech has everything aligning for them this week. You're at home. You've got the big games where Brent Key and his team have overperformed in the past. Haynes King, if he's healthy, that's the main question. But you have Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, this QB run duo. It's kind of like your year that you've been building up to, and you have your biggest opportunity you're going to get maybe outside of Georgia in your building with a team looking as vulnerable as Clemson. I think you have to get it done to announce yourself that you're going to contend for maybe the ACC and be, a real player in college football moving forward. And I think they're going to do it. I'm thinking 23-17 Yellow Jackets, another day where Clemson struggles. The one concern I have is with how good this Clemson defense seems to be at forcing turnovers and Georgia Tech's turnover problems they had in week 1 against Colorado. That's a concern, but I do consider turnovers to be random. I'm not trying to predict them. So taking them out of the equation, I think Georgia Tech is in a great spot to get this win against Clemson and really shake up college football to start the day. With Clemson falling to 1-2, that's going to be a huge story. The next game, and maybe the biggest of the day, is Georgia taking on Tennessee. We got to talk about this Georgia passing game. What's going on with it? You threw the ball against Austin Peay a lot, only put up 28 points. The wide receiver core has disappointed me outside of Zachariah Branch. I thought it could be maybe a strength of the team. Looks questionable. And Tennessee, that's really where you should be able to get them defensively, as their top 2 corners are still out for this game. But I don't know I trust the Georgia passing attack enough to do that. And you think Georgia's probably going to have to put up some points with how good this Tennessee offense has looked. 45 against Syracuse, 72 against East Tennessee State. But that's where you got to talk about Kirby Smart versus Josh Heupel. Because Heupel's been at Tennessee for 4 years, and he's never put up more than 21 points against Kirby Smart, and he's had great offenses. Think about that Hendon Hooker team. Even when Joe Milton was there, his team was explosive, but Kirby Smart and his scheme has shut them down every single time. Finally, the home field impact. Neyland Stadium is going to be loud. It's going to be rocky. And Gunnar Stockton, this is going to be his first time in a road environment like that. I think that could lead to him making some mistakes, probably an interception or two, and probably throw off his rhythm. And that could be a real player in this game. For the reasons of smart success against Heupel's scheme and the home field environment with not trusting Georgia's passing game and a young quarterback in Gunnar Stockton, I'm expecting a pretty low-scoring defensive battle like we've had through the first couple weeks of college football in a lot of these big games. I think we get another one. And in that type of game, it's going to come down to the little things. And when I have a Kirby Smart team that's found ways to win consistently with all the success he's had, I just have to put more trust in that than the Josh Heupel-led team. And that's why I think the Bulldogs go on the road at Neyland and squeak out a pretty low-scoring game, maybe 20-17, maybe 23-20, that type of game. And the Bulldogs in Georgia win a big one. Taking a break from predictions, we're going to start by giving out my top 25. First, before we reveal 25 through 21, though, two honorable mentions. Texas A&M and Nebraska just missed the cut. And then two teams I want to point out are not on here. Alabama, I know you beat someone 73-0. Not enough on your resume. Clemson, you've looked terrible. Don't know how you're ranked 12th in the AP. No right to be ranked. Neither of those teams will be appearing. With that being said, here's 25 through 21. Starting off, two Mississippi schools. Mississippi State, do I think they're actually a top 25 team? No. Do I expect them to make a bowl game? No. Do I think ASU's still probably better than them? Yes, but I have to give them credit for the win. They just sneak in. Ole Miss, kind of the opposite. I think they're better than this. I think they're going to improve as Austin Simmons improves. But after a rough start, pretty close win against Kentucky, couldn't put them too much higher. Texas Tech and Washington are two teams that have just destroyed inferior competition, and I personally believe in a lot, but we'll find out more as they verse better teams coming up. And then Missouri had a really good comeback win. Wide receivers looked really good. Brabula looked good in that Kansas game. So give them credit. They're 22. They've surprised me so far with how good they've looked. Not really seeming to drop off from last year. Got to give them credit to the Tigers. Next up, 20 through 16, and we start with South Carolina, who's looked really good on special teams and defense, but the offense has been disappointing when you consider Lenore Sellers was supposed to be a Heisman contender. The receivers haven't looked like what we thought they could, or at least I thought they could. So South Carolina still looks like a good team, but I don't know. I need the offense to show me more. Maybe they will against Vanderbilt this week. My number 18 team, who was just so good at second half against Virginia Tech. The AP definitely should have ranked them after that win. It's disappointing that they didn't. Georgia Tech 19 still has the Colorado win, which is solid, and I think they're a really good team. Texas at 17, I know the AP is going to have them higher, but I wasn't super impressed against San Jose State. The offense just doesn't look good, but the defense looks pretty dominant, which is enough to have them 17 for me. And then Illinois, I picked against them. All right, we're good. I picked against Illinois in the Duke game, and then you beat them 45-19. Defense looked really good. Do I think it was kind of Duke's self-inflicted wounds? Yeah, sort of, but I got to give the Illini credit for proving me wrong. They come in at 16. Back into the predictions, this is one that, based off the spread, you wouldn't think would deserve a breakdown of Miami's 17.5-point favorites. But after what South Florida has done this year, I think you guys agree this one definitely needs to be talked about. And first thing we're going to talk about is South Florida now being in the spotlight in two different ways. The first one being, do you get a little overconfident? Is there a chance you a little bit of a letdown? Oh, look what we did to Boise State. Look what we did to Florida. Look, everyone's talking about us. We're, like the darling of college football right now. Do you kind of not perform up to your standard? And then the second thing is it different, for South Florida when you're hunting Florida and Boise State, but maybe catch them off guard a little bit versus Miami now being like, oh, we really got to take these guys seriously. Then Byron Brown for South Florida, if they're going to pull off this upset, I think he has to be really good on the ground because they try to run this high-tempo stuff, but the offense really hasn't been that great. It wasn't that good against Florida, and it struggled for a while in Boise State before breaking through. And I think if they're going to beat Miami, Byron Brown has to do a lot on the ground, making plays happen, being just an X-factor kind of guy, because outside of that, I don't see him having a ton of success against Miami. Whereas for Miami in the line of scrimmage, I think they're going to have a really good day. I think their O-line is going to have an ability to move South Florida really well, run the ball really well, opening the things up for Carson Beck in play action, and I think they're going to put up points. The reason that the line is just line of scrimmage, not O-line, I also think their D-line, with what Ruben Bain's done so far this year with David Blay making an impact, is going to disrupt the South Florida run game. And overall, I think Miami's going to comfortably win this game. I don't want to disrespect South Florida, and I know they've surprised people every step along the way this year, but I just think Miami is a higher echelon of team than Florida, than Boise State, a true title contender in my mind after what they've done to Notre Dame. And South Florida is not to that level, in my opinion. Maybe they prove us wrong again, shock the world one more time, but I think the Hurricanes win this one. I'm thinking 41-21 Hurricane. All right, fourth game, another Florida team involved, the other half of that South Florida upset. And this one, you got to talk about how does Florida respond. The cliches are going to be said by a lot of people, but I think they're being said for a reason. Florida, you can lose that game, and Billy Napier can think he's out of a job, and he can lose the locker room, and you can look ahead and say, we got LSU and Miami and Texas and A&M and Georgia, and like there's no chance the season's over, and you can lay down and just come out and get smacked by LSU. Or you can be like, no, that's not us. We're going to prove people that was just a fluke game. We're not going out like this and have an inspired performance. I think either one of those is a big possibility. I lean more towards the inspired performance. I think they're going to come out fighting and give it everything they've got, and you're going to be left. A lot of people are left wondering, how is that the same team that lost to South Florida? Then you remember it's a bunch of 18 to 22-year-old kids who are making a bunch of money who aren't, going to give the most consistent performance every week. But this week, I think will be more towards their high ceiling than what we saw against South Florida as just a completely, abysmal performance, really. But just because you play an inspired performance against LSU doesn't mean you win. And a big reason of that is how good this LSU defense looks. Harold Perkins and the pass rush look great. The linebacker unit's been good, and the secondary has been great. I mean, just look at what they did against those Clemson wide receivers. And with how bad Florida's offense looked at time against South Florida, there's a chance LSU just shuts them down. And then Death Valley at night, maybe the hardest environment to play in. And with all the rhythm issues Florida already seem to have in their own building against South Florida, think of how elevated those could be on the road in Death Valley. So while I think Florida is going to give, a higher end performance, I don't think that's going to be enough to beat LSU. I know LSU looked a little shaky against Louisiana Tech. I think you sandwiched that game between Clemson and Florida. I thought you were bound for a little bit of a dip. I think we're back to seeing how good this team can be, being a contender this year in college football. And I think they get the win. I'll say 27-23. Like, Florida keeps it tight, pushes them to the limit, but the Tigers still get it done and come away successful. Another break from the predictions. Let's give you 15 through 11 of my top 25. Coming at 15, a drop. I had them in top 10 last week. That is TCU, but that UNC win, more I thought about it, less impressive I got. They look bad against Charlotte. So resume not quite as good. But I still think they're really good, just not quite as impressive. They dropped to 15. 14, I have Notre Dame. And if they win this week against A&M, they could shoot up. But for right now, the only thing on their resume is a loss. And while it's a loss to a team I think is really, really good, can't give you that much credit just for a loss. Then 13, Auburn. The Baylor win got better this week to me after what they did against SMU. And Auburn's passing game looked really good, given it was inferior competition, I think Ball State, right? But I wanted to see the passing game look good, and it did. So I give them credit for that. They're 13. 12, I got Tennessee, who, you put up the most points you put up in the modern era, 72 points against East Tennessee State. The offenses just look great, but Syracuse still not the best competition. East Tennessee State certainly not. And now playing Georgia, you could skyrocket top 5, top 3 potentially based off what you do this week. But for now, I'm still a little bit trepidatious on this team, just outside the top 10 for me. And then 11, South Florida. Look, you beat Boise State. I didn't have them top 25, but the AP did. And then you beat Florida, who I would have had top 25 if I did this video last week. So really impressive resume. Maybe the best 2 wins in all of college football. But the style wasn't, the most impressive. The offense struggled against Florida and at times against Boise State. But still, the resume is great. Eye test doesn't fully pass for me to be top 10, but they're right there. Second to last prediction we have is Vanderbilt going on the road to South Carolina. And I think the most obvious thing to talk about is the Virginia Tech reference point, because South Carolina played them at a neutral site and really struggled at times, especially offensively, but special teams kind of saved the day. And Vanderbilt, a little bit of first half struggles, some turnovers, but in the second half in Blacksburg just laid it on them, completely dominant. And just based off that, Vanderbilt looked like a better team than South Carolina. Then we've already talked about South Carolina's offense. I think there's higher potential to have here. I think the receivers can be better. I think Lenore Sellers can be better. And I think at some point this year, they'll have a performance that shows, closer to what last year's team looked like. Haven't seen it yet. Is tonight the night? I'm not sure. But Williams-Brice Stadium at night, I think, is going to give them an edge. And with how good the defense has already been, it's going to be loud. I think it'll help them in throwing off Vanderbilt a little bit. And then this shouldn't sway me, but it kind of does. And that is the fact that Vanderbilt hasn't beaten South Carolina in 16 years, and they played them every single year. In that time, Vanderbilt has beaten Georgia multiple times. They've beaten Florida multiple times, Tennessee multiple times. They've beaten Alabama, the Ole Miss. They've beaten a lot of teams, but they played South Carolina 16 straight years and have never beat them. And I know that's independent of this year, but just looking at that, it makes me think, do I really think Vanderbilt can go into Williams-Brice at night and beat them? Because even though I think they've looked better this year, I just can't go that far. I'm going South Carolina 28-24, I'll say. Gamecocks get it done once for the 17th straight year over Vanderbilt. Final prediction, and that is nightcap game of A&M going to Notre Dame. What's going on with Jeremiah Love? We've only seen 1 week, right? But why did he only get 10 carries against Miami when he's a guy I thought would be a Heisman contender and clear-cut best running back in college football? Are they actually going to involve him against A&M? Because if not, do I think C.J. Carr and these weapons are just going to beat him through the air? Maybe, but I think it'd be a lot more helpful if you gave it to one of the best players in all of college football behind an O-line that I think also could be one of the best in college football. But what do I know? Then the Texas A&M receivers versus the Notre Dame secondary. Mario Cravers looked really good. Casey Concepcion looks really good. And they're going up against a talented Notre Dame secondary, one of the best cover corners in the sport. So I think that's going to be just a really fun battle to watch. I think both, there'll be battles one each way. The A&M receivers will make some plays, but there'll be some breakups, some big stops from Notre Dame as well. I think it's just going to be a great matchup to watch. And I also think a lot of it will come down to how well Marcel Reed can do throwing the ball, because we know how good he can be on the ground. And at times he's great throwing the ball, but it's not always there. So that's going to be a big question for him. And then I think you got to talk about the week 1 adjustments for Notre Dame, because unlike, the Clemsons who lost week 1 and then struggled when they came out, or Texas, Notre Dame lost that big game, got a bye week, gets to see all they did wrong and kind of adjust and right away find out if they've improved against another top team, this time at home. And I think that's going to make a big difference for them. I expect a big jump from C.J. Carr at home in his second game. I expect them to adjust, giving the ball more to their playmakers like Jeremiah Love. And I think Notre Dame's going to come out and win this game. I'll say 27-17 Irish. I think this Notre Dame team is still really good. We saw it start to click late in that Miami game. I think it carries over, and the Irish start was going to be a good run, building up their resume after the week 1 loss for the rest of the season. I still have a lot of confidence in this Notre Dame football team to get the win. Now we move on to the final part of this video where we're going to give my top 10 one by one. So starting off at number 10, we have Iowa State. 2 big wins already, Kansas State and Iowa. But Iowa's offense, is terrible, and Kansas State also might be terrible. So the resume is slowly dropping, and I almost consider putting South Florida. But I just like the eye test a little more for Iowa State. The receivers, especially the tight ends, look good, and Rocco Beck just looks so clutch. So I kept them in at 10. 9, I have Georgia. The talent is there, and I want to put them higher, but the production is just not there, and so many other teams have looked better against inferior competition. And it's the same story with Penn State. Penn State and Georgia are kind of living off what I thought they'd be in the preseason. You've been good enough against the inferior competition to keep your top 10 spot, but I'm running out of patience. Georgia, I'll find out this week. Penn State will find out soon against Oregon. But yeah, it's a little concerning they haven't been as dominant as I hoped. 7, I have Utah, who has the UCLA win, but it got a little bit worse this week, but dominated inferior competition, unlike Penn State and Georgia. I think Devon Dampier could be a dark horse Heisman. I think they look like the best team in the Big 12, and I think they look like a team that is, I'm not playoff bound, but certainly will compete to be in the college football playoff. And then number 6, I have Oklahoma. I thought it was a really impressive win against Michigan. I learned what I needed to about John Mateer. I know how good the defense is going to be. And really, I've seen enough. Like Deion Burks, now that he's healthy, a real explosive weapon for them in the passing game. The O-line, saw what I needed to see there to know that they're improved. And now, overall, that just proved to me Oklahoma is ready to compete. Now, the schedule is going to be a gauntlet. They could certainly drop from here in coming weeks. But as of right now, the resume combined with the eye test makes them the number 16 for me. Now into the top 5, and at 5, I have Florida State, who added, 77-3 victory. And the Alabama win also looks a little bit like Alabama, we know, responded pretty well. So the Alabama win still holds a lot of weight. And now with them, because last week I had them behind Utah, Penn State, Georgia, but they played much better against inferior competition than Penn State and Georgia did, and the resume is better. So I got to put them at 5. And then 4, Oregon, who what they did to Oklahoma State should just be a crime. What was it? 3 plays, 130-something yards, 2 touchdowns to start the game, 69-3. They could have put up 100 if they wanted to. This team's pretty much everything I thought they had the potential to be. Like, in my beginning of the year, I said by the end of the year, Oregon will be the best team in college football. They might already be the best team in college football. Like the O-line already looks ready. Dante Moore looks to already have put it together. This team looks so scary right now. It's just like Oklahoma State's not good enough for me to jump them against the three teams who have really elite wins. Miami beating Notre Dame at home. LSU, I dropped to number 2 because Ohio State looked better against Grambling than LSU did against Louisiana Tech. And Ohio State still has the defending championship thing on its belt a little bit. And the Texas win, I now think, is a slightly different tier than Clemson with how Clemson struggled. So I go Ohio State 1, LSU 2, Miami 3, Oregon 4, Florida State to wrap up the 1 of 1 top 25 in college football. Let me know what are your guys' top 25 teams. Maybe give me your top 10. And who are your picks for the week? Leave it all in the comment section down below. I'd love to see it. With that being said, if you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, and until next time.